Hello, I am the Script Doctor and welcome to the channel. Secret Hideout has decided to punish Star Trek fans once again with their latest attempt at a Trek series, this time a cartoon titled Lower Decks. The premise is to follow 4 ensigns during their duties aboard the Cerritos. The characters are very one-dimensional. We have the by-the-books officer, the hopeful optimist, the tech-savvy geek, and the rebel. The plot of this first episode addresses a follow-up to First Contact known as Second Contact, basically establishing relations with a new planet. What is strange is how this new planet becomes part of the Federation. It was my understanding that First Contact is just an introduction, an offer of friendship and potential alliance, but not an automatic entry into the Federation. While a First Contact operation can consist of months or years, even after First Contact is established, I don't think entering the Federation is an easy task. I thought planets, after having interacted with Federation representatives, made an application to join the Federation. Or the Federation would make an offer after years, if not decades, of interaction with a fellow warp-capable species such as the Bajorans. But in Lower Decks, the writers make it appear that First Contact is an automatic entry into the Federation, and Second Contact is giving a primitive warp-capable planet advanced technology to communicate and change their economic structure. Which is ridiculous. The show treats Second Contact like the Cerritos is a courier dropping off a standard Federation care package. What are they, the United Federation Postal Service? The episode opens with one of our 4 main characters, Boimler, doing a mock captain's log setting up the episode. He'll be our by-the-books character, wanting to follow the rules and ideals of Starfleet with dreams of commanding his own ship. A singularly focused officer, and because of that, the easy target for any and all jokes or disasters. He is interrupted by Mariner, the rebel, who is drunk and for some reason infatuated with Boimler. She teases him about making a log, climbs over him, and tosses him out of a storage closet. After admitting to drinking illegal Romulan whiskey, she grabs a bat'leth and swings it around, chanting Worf and describing Klingon behavior right before stabbing Boimler in the thigh. End of teaser and into the opening credits. The opening credits are desperate to get a laugh by showing the ship escaping a black hole, striking an ice mountain from an asteroid like a car would hit a parking meter, approaching a skirmish between the Borg and Romulans only to retreat after being fired upon once, followed by what appears to be the ship traveling at warp with a giant space squid sucking on a nacelle. The theme song is also far more familiar to the Orville than anything Star Trek. Sadly, CBS will not allow me to sample it for you to hear, so you'll have to check that out after this review, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments section. When we return to the show, there are no consequences played out from the teaser. We avoid all the potential that could come from Mariner attacking a fellow officer and instead get an introduction to Ensign Tendi. She's the chipper, naive optimist, the one we've seen before in Star Trek Discovery. However, she's an Orion, but for some reason has green hair instead of black. She's assigned to Boimler for acclimation to the ship, who we see isn't in sickbay recovering from a traumatic injury, but instead fixing a damaged replicator. Isn't that an engineer's job? You know, a yellow shirt. Or wouldn't an NCO like Chief O'Brien be addressing this type of issue? If he's supposed to be an ensign in a command training program, would he not be working on tactical, piloting, navigation, diplomacy, or communications? You know, developing the skills that a commander would need. Even in the Next Generation episode titled Lower Decks, the officers we met have bridge, operations, and engineering duties. They're assigned to a specific department. Here, the show establishes that these ensigns could be placed anywhere, as if filling in a gap in needs with a random body outweighs having enough skilled personnel to do the job required. While Boimler tries to impress and encourage Tendi, Mariner interrupts and tells us how she was once a higher rank and that it's not all it is cracked up to be. We also learn that her name is Beckett Mariner. Her initials are BM, and yes, her character work is a bowel movement of sorts, but if you flip those initials in reverse, you get MB, or Michael Burnham. So brace yourself for an always right, always correct archetype whose only flaw is being obnoxious. It is very telling that Mariner, the rebel, was once in a high position. What do you want to bet that she was a commander or an executive officer on another ship before being demoted to ensign for disobeying orders? She was probably the best in her class, the ideal officer, on track to be the youngest to ever captain a ship in Starfleet until she felt it was wrong to do something that would violate the Prime Directive or something. Mariner clearly has a chip on her shoulder. as when Baumüller explains the layout of the ship, she points out that everything above their section is boring, lame, not important, kind of like the execution of this cartoon show. We get a convenient introduction to Rutherford, an engineering ensign working on a panel who has recently been cybernetically enhanced. Was this voluntary or a result of an injury? Because my understanding of the society in Starfleet is that it is considered taboo or illegal to mutilate your body for enhancements if there's nothing wrong with you. Geordi was born blind and augmented with a visor so he could see. Picard had his heart punctured and was given a replacement to stay alive, and Nog lost his leg in the Dominion War and was provided a replacement so he could walk. We learn about the strict rules to enhancements and modifications through Bashir in a DS9 episode. The pathetic aspect of Rutherford's enhancement is that they're acting up on him. See, it's funny because it's not really an enhancement. Get the joke? Rutherford welcomes Tendi aboard, and Mariner changes the conversation to Rutherford's date with Ensign Barnes, because that's such a natural segue. We get further exposition that Rutherford's cybernetic implant is suppressing his emotion and he actually wants to be nervous on his date. This is a peculiar form of character development, as we are seeing a character that would rather risk having emotions that would prevent a successful date, as opposed to one that would embrace the ability to control their emotions and situation for a more positive outcome. But after we meet Rutherford, we don't learn much more about the characters, so we're going to skip ahead the lousy sight gags and jump straight into Act 2. Act 2 starts with the first officer and away team concluding their mission. He gets bit by an insect as he informs the inhabitants that they'll be building a subspace comm array so they can communicate with other planets within the Federation. Isn't that somewhat irresponsible? The Federation giving a newly contacted alien species their technology? Also, what are the circumstances for this first contact? Is this species a warp-capable species? That is typically the main reason for interaction. Others could be that the species themselves discovered a Federation starship and opened the line of communication. If that were the case, why would Starfleet have to build a communications array on the surface of this planet? We see from an establishing shot of this planet that they have advanced-looking ships in their atmosphere, so if they are indeed warp-capable, and they were able to communicate with Starfleet to begin with, why do they need to build a comm relay on their planet? Couldn't they just provide them with Federation frequencies for open communication? While that would be the more prudent approach, that would end the show early, so instead we get a contrived viral infection aboard the starship plot. The away team returns to the ship, and for some reason they're able to rematerialize aboard, even though the first officer, Ransom, was bitten by an alien species. Shouldn't the transporter biofilters give the operator an alert of a foreign substance? Wouldn't that put Ransom in the buffer until a doctor could arrive and properly quarantine him from the rest of the crew? Let's say, for argument's sake, that the biofilters didn't detect anything that was threatening. Ransom should still be reporting to sickbay. It would be a reflex given these circumstances. He has to have been serving long enough to know that getting bit by a bug on an alien planet could have harmful effects to himself and put his crew at risk. His responsibility is the safety and function of the entire ship, but the writers make him this arrogant cocksure jerk, which makes myself, and I'm sure many of the audience watching this show, question how Ransom became first officer to begin with. We find Boimler reporting to the captain, where she requests that he keep watch over Mariner because she runs a very tight ship, which contradicts the behavior we've seen in Ransom. But this scene is to set up the episode's conflict, put the rebel's fate in the hands of the officer she is in fact bullying. What is fascinating is that this has all occurred after he was stabbed by Mariner in the opening teaser. So if this is supposed to be a well-run ship, and the captain, who is obviously Mariner's mother, wants to know all the insubordinate and inappropriate dealings of her daughter, why is she still on her ship after assaulting a fellow officer with a batleth earlier in the episode? From my perspective, if Mariner is a problem aboard this ship, and they want to get rid of her, then the evidence should be on record at this point. Drunk and disorderly conduct, in possession of contraband, assault on a fellow officer, that's 3 strikes. Why isn't she out of here already? But instead of following the show's own story, the writers take us to Rutherford on his date with a Trill woman. Don't know if she's joined with a symbiont or not, but regardless, the date is going well, and that's what's supposed to be important right now. Or so the writers want you to think. The date gets interrupted with the conflict of Commander Ransom becoming a vampire from his bug bite, and he starts attacking and spreading the virus among the patrons of the bar, while others draw phasers to fend off the infected. What type of officers attend a bar armed with phasers? Do these types of events happen frequently on this ship? Regardless, Rutherford and his date don't really panic. In fact, they continue their conversation. They are interrupted briefly by an officer giving exposition to let us know that this chaos is now happening all over the ship. Really? That quickly? You're telling me that the instant Ransom started attacking people in the bar, there wasn't a single officer that reported this to the bridge and orders coming down to seal off the deck and corridors around the area to protect the rest of the ship? After that exposition, Rutherford and his date still continue their conversation about their quarters location and playing squash, because it's contrary to the serious situation around them. How funny, right? Right? Well, instead of following this through, we return to the planet's surface where Baumler spots Mariner loading up a dune buggy with supplies and heading off of the construction site. Seriously? Dune buggies? Like the Argo from Nemesis? Wheels? In Starfleet? When we clearly see hover wagons moving cargo behind Baumler? Back on the ship, Tendi finally reports to sickbay, where the chief medical officer is ordering her to strap down all the infected patients. Strap down? This isn't the 23rd century, it's the 24th. They have biobed force fields. Straps aren't required. But it is a situation fueled by panic and urgency which the writers equate to comedy. They try to up it by having Tendi completely disregard the situation around her and try to introduce herself to her commanding officer that is infected and, for all intents and purposes, mindless. Is the joke supposed to be her trying to maintain a professional attitude in the face of panic? Or are they trying to make her appear oblivious? Back on the surface, Baumler sees Mariner handing off supplies to two aliens and he hops out to catch her in the act, demanding that she explain her actions and assuming that she's selling weapons. Isn't Baumler supposed to be a by-the-books officer? One who follows rules and regulations? Why is he making accusations without evidence? All he knows is that Mariner is supplying these aliens with Federation items. We don't know what those items are, why she is doing it, or why she's being so discreet about it. But Baumler decides to jump to weapons because he has to be the most incompetent of our cast of characters. So much so that he draws and discharges a phaser at the feet of a pair of aliens, which is an act of aggression and could destroy the relationship between this species and the Federation. In what way is this character consistency? Baumler and Mariner quote regulations at each other, with Mariner obviously knowing more regulations than Baumler and justifying her actions as providing farming equipment, which is still a violation, but regardless, we can't follow through with that because the farmers run away and open up a cage that releases a giant alien spider. Mariner chooses to blame this situation on Baumler because even though she left her post, she did it to help farmers that would be ignored or forgotten by Federation bureaucracy and as a result starve. It is revealed that she was on the ship that made first contact with this species a year ago, and that's how she met the farmers, and we can infer that such an interaction may have contributed to her being demoted and transferred to the Cerritos. She continues to inform us that she's served on 5 ships, been trapped in sentient caves, and nearly decapitated and held in a Klingon prison. All exposition that should have been established earlier on. However, facing the threat of a giant alien spider is a far more appropriate setting for exposition of this type than, say, doing it while they're walking through the corridors or as they're starting their new mission. So the show is establishing that this character is going to teach Baumler that Starfleet is more than rules and regulations, and that the manual isn't always the go-to source when exploring the galaxy. That Mariner knows more and is better than everyone else in Starfleet, and if Baumler listens to her, they'll get out of this situation alive. If she's so confident and sure of herself that she's always right and the best at everything, then why was she demoted? It was probably out of pettiness and not because she's full of BM. Baumler decides to contact the ship for an emergency beam-out, and Mariner tosses his comm badge away as it dematerializes. Why would she do this? Why make things more difficult for her and Baumler given their situation? Neither of them have any idea what is happening on the ship, so if they are to encounter danger, an emergency transport should be appropriate. But we can't have that, because this is a convoluted episode, and they need to remain on the planet so their actions can lead to a convenient resolution for the virus on the ship. Mariner justifies remaining on the surface because the farmers need the animal. Is it running away? Because it looks to me like it's hunting our characters and not running a rampage in the area. Also, where are these farmers that she speaks of? They're the ones that are familiar with this giant spider, so they should be able to help out our characters. So the stakes on the surface have changed to not just surviving the spider, but also capturing it so it can be returned to the starving farmers. Balmier suggests stunning the spider with their phasers, and the joke is that such an action could spoil the milk of the creature. This is where we're getting into Rick and Morty territory, or rather a very watered-down derivative take on a Rick and Morty episode, which is to be expected when the show creator used to work on Rick and Morty. That's correct, used to work on Rick and Morty, not anymore. I don't know why, but I'm starting to get a good idea based on this episode so far. Mariner's plan involves dressing up decoys while they hide in a tree wearing their underpants so they can jump on the spider and do, something? I don't know. They didn't fashion a net or any type of trap. Just a distraction followed by leaping onto its back. I don't see any victory in this type of tactic. How is this character supposed to be always right if she doesn't even have a plan to prove her point? For some reason, Balmier decides to jump as well. It's not a believable character choice because, again, no plan, but the writers need him to jump so that the spider can catch him in its mouth. Finally, the farmers show up to help. Balmier wants Mariner to stun the creature, but the farmers beg her not to because it will spoil the spider's milk. A callback to that not joke made earlier. We learn that this spider is an herbivore and won't eat meat, but it will suckle on Balmier for a while to ingest his moisture. This leads us to a very lackluster sight gag. A sight gag that should work, but for me it just doesn't land. Perhaps because we learned too quickly that Balmier isn't really under any threat. Maybe if the reveal of Balmier not actually being in life-threatening danger was at the end of the scene, such as a punchline, it would have landed better. But at the same time, it also feels like something I've seen before that isn't very unique to Star Trek. The spider's sucking action is very intense and violent and generates a very understandable fear from Balmier. But what if we changed it up a bit? What if this giant spider wasn't merely a farm animal, but a farmer as well? That this species trades, for lack of a better term, milk with each other. That they're also another sentient species and this ends up being a first contact situation. What if instead of a wild and intense use of Balmier as a baby's pacifier, it was a slow and creepy act of friendship? Balmier learns from the farmers the situation I described and takes the initiative of first contact. He holds out his hand in friendship and the spider starts to suck on it, slowly. It's awkward, it's disgusting, perhaps it could be funny. The farmer says that the spider is accepting his offer of friendship. The spider then presents one of its legs to Balmier and the farmer tells him that he has to suck the leg as well to reciprocate the offer of friendship. This would escalate the awkwardness and the alienness of first contact in having the two essentially sucking each other's hands. We can believe that Balmier would do this because he's a by-the-books officer. He wants to show initiative and show that he is capable of performing a successful first contact. The farmers can build on this joke by stating that once the spider exchanges enough moisture with Balmier, their friendship will be complete and they can celebrate by starting the milking process of the spider. We can end the scene with the farmer looking at Mariner and suggesting that he and her can do the same thing because he sees that she too has milk sacs. Too bad we didn't get anything like that. We return to the ship where Rutherford and his date are spacewalking to a rally point and talking about their musical tastes. They re-enter the ship to fight off more zombies and make their way to a secure area. His date kisses him, but he doesn't acknowledge the intensity or the romance, but instead focuses more on how the computer system didn't recognize their comm badges to open the doors and allow them through. Because he's not focusing on the girl throwing herself at him, but instead a diagnostic issue, it's supposed to be funny. We are thrust into sickbay where Tendi has to manually pump a crewman's heart. Why? Because it's a sight gag that the writers think will be funny. For some reason we are not privy to, the anesthetic is not working on any of the patients, so every person that was attacked or injured has to suffer, up to and including this audience. Back on the surface, Mariner is sipping on some of the spider's milk as the spider is starting to tire itself out after sucking on Balmier. On their way back to camp, Balmier admits to monitoring Mariner and that he's ordered to inform the captain of any breach of conduct. We learn from this conversation that Mariner and Balmier have been serving together for a year. A year? Really? They've been on this ship together for a year and he doesn't know anything about her past? Not that she served on other ships? Not that she was demoted? What had they been doing this entire time? This relationship between them is trying to be new, but also at the same time trying to be fairly established? Wouldn't Bulmer have a massive list of issues or a better understanding of who Mariner is at this point and vice versa if they'd been serving together for a year? Because so far in this episode it feels more like they've been serving together for at most a month and nowhere near a year. Bulmer is committed to reporting Mariner to the captain even though Mariner claims that the senior staff only cares about glory and notoriety. When they return to camp, they immediately beam back aboard the ship. Wait, what? Was the away team not informed of a viral outbreak aboard this ship? What about the fact that anyone on board wouldn't want to bring their away team back for their own safety? But the story needs them to return to the ship because the goo on Bulmer from the spider is the cure for the disease. They don't know this yet, but we the audience do because this is a very predictable show. It's very strange that the captain didn't reach out to the inhabitants of this planet and ask them, hey, so one of our officers got bit by a bug and is now puking up black goo and feasting on flesh. So is this the thing that happens on your world, and if so, how do we stop it? How does this type of conversation not happen? While the away mission is quickly learning of the events on board the ship, the captain is wanting options. The chief of security, some Bajoran officer, wants to destroy the ship. Part of me thinks he's going to be something like the Worf of this series, where every option he presents involves destroying the enemy. I'm being hyperbolic towards Worf, but I strongly suspect that this is going to be the case when it comes to this particular character. The Doctor, on the other hand, thinks the slime on Bulmer will save them because plot contrivance. They shoot their way back to sickbay, use the slime to whip up an antidote, and cure the crew. As the senior staff congratulate each other, Mariner sticks up for Bulmer by remarking that he's the one that was significant in helping to save the crew. The captain, we learn named Captain Freeman, gives her supplemental log updating the story, complimenting her doctor and senior staff for saving the ship. Bulmer is present for the log recording, and when the captain mispronounces his name, he starts to realize that Mariner was right all along, and chooses not to report her misconduct to the captain. Freeman dismisses Bulmer and receives a call from her husband the Admiral as they bitch about Mariner and how neither parent wants to deal with her. Bulmer returns to Mariner at the bar where he apologizes to her for his actions, because she has to be better than him in every way, and that Starfleet is better for having her in it than out. She decides to take him under her wing, where she'll be his mentor and help him become a captain. The episode ends with as many Star Trek character references as they can muster in the last 30 seconds, with nothing new added to them or any jokes aside than, look, we know things about Star Trek. Star Trek Lower Decks is pretty much as expected, a low-hanging fruit approach to comedy with a Star Trek veneer. As you can tell from my recount and comments on the episode, the plot is incredibly contrived. Even for a compressed story of 26 minutes, we don't really get a good understanding of what life on Lower Decks is actually like. What we're getting is a big action thriller adventure, with ensigns as leads instead of utilizing the mocking and boring nature of not being on the senior staff. This is without question going to be an adventure show just like all the rest. The only difference is a superficial one where the characters are going to be looked at as disposable from other members of the crew. It's not going to take advantage of the boring situations of life on Lower Decks, or as an ensign not part of the senior staff. It's not going to have fun with the problems of ship operations that would otherwise never be seen on a normal Trek show. We're not going to see how the social structure of the freshman crew interact with each other. We're not going to see them doing a pointless operation while in the background a far more cool or exciting adventure is occurring. What we are going to see is these characters being put on what would seem as a mundane mission that will escalate to a pinnacle moment for the ship where they have to save everyone and are then brushed aside by the end. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Way to go, Secret Hideout. You took a cool concept and phoned it in while sitting on the toilet. As expected. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.